Well, I just want to remind people on this July 4th, 2016, 240 years after the signing the Declaration of Independence, well, basically 240 years, our independence, the main place that we actually embody the spirit of the revolution, if you want to call it that, or principles of government of the people, by the people, and for the people, and government is only being legitimate by the consent of the people. These principles are still mainly embodied in the people in the South who embrace the ideals of the Confederacy and what the Confederacy fought for. Because I want to state here emphatically, once and for all, that when the South had lost in the Civil War, the war between the states, the War of Northern Aggression, or the Tax Revolt of 1861, however you want to term that conflict, when they lost in 1861, the principles of 1776 were largely thrown aside, and we've been in decline ever since. As far as the principles of what our nation has founded upon, we became an empire. We have not become a voluntary association of free states and individual rights, as was embodied by the Constitution and the founders. Um, the Bill of Rights has turned out to be absolutely correct. The Bill of Rights itself. Now, the document of the Declaration of Independence, I've noticed that it's been examined by some people in the major media, and they've been bringing this up over and over again. It was like, yeah, we want to be declared independent from, England, the UK, right? That's what it's saying, and I'm saying in a flippant way, of course, but they were stating that since they put a period and completed a sentence that what their grievances were, and that they hold the rights, our rights, inalienably being rights to be self-evident, that we want the pursuit of happiness and the fruits of our labor, and to continue on in independent fashion. What they stated, that since there was a period before that the government only derives its legitimacy from the will of the people, that any government that does not have the will of the people on its side is not legitimate. They only derive their authority from the will of the people. The major media is trying to argue that the Declaration of Independence is actually a document that does not state that the government does not derive its legitimacy from the people itself, which tell you that's freaking blatantly right in your face, that the major media is your enemy. And they could freaking tout this July 4th celebration, 1776, all they want. But the reality is they represent the corporation. They represent fascism, Marxism, any type of totalitarian thing there is out there, including the Union. The Confederacy is actually something that's embodied the true spirit of 1776 all the way. As a matter of fact, people that were fought during that time, a lot of times under weapons, actually in their minds they thought they were fighting for the same damn things that 2 or 3 generations earlier that they were fighting for in 1776 against King George, but with more acute grievances. As a matter of fact, my family itself, which have ancestors bearing my name going all the way back to 1775, 1776, 1777, Battle of Moultrie, South Carolina, also served under the General Francis Marion, General Francis Marion, the Swamp Fox in South Carolina, ancestor that served under them, and also at the British siege and fall of in South Carolina of the fort there. And 2 or 3 generations later, they were fighting for the Confederacy for causes that were more self-evident. But since the Confederacy lost and the propaganda has been out there that the Confederacy was all about hate and all this kind of garbage, we've already freaking lost the battle of ideology for what this country really stood for in the first place, July 4th, 1776, and what we actually fought for in the first place. The corporatocracy and the dickheads won. That's really what the hell it is. And the president himself is somebody that doesn't represent this nation. He represents the corporation, and he's got lineage going all the way back to the Muslim slave traders of Kenya, actually. The Muslim slave traders of Kenya. That's right, Uncle Obama does have lineage going back to the Muslim slave traders of Kenya. But I want to put this out here because, I know it's not going to be a large video with millions of views, because I realize what's even going on not only in the major media but also the larger alternative media. They have a lot more funding, a lot more advertising, and a lot more power behind them, money wise, to tell the public lies about history itself. And you know what? History is something that is living, even though it's past, it's still what the events have actually happened. You know, there's an old Roman expression, I forgot the Latin for it, but the truth is mighty and the truth shall prevail. The truth is, we lost 1776 when the Confederacy actually lost in 1865. And I want to really tell you something that in the policies of New York City and the hypocrisy of New York City itself, where the established financial powers are that control the Fruit Loop House in Washington, D.C., I want to tell you that actuality, New York City was very much intertwined with not only the slave trade, but all the actual fruits of slavery in the South, and even the banking and finance system, the merchants in industries and the shipping systems, shipping industries were all tied in with slavery in the South. For that reason, New York City was a democratic a city, and that is why you see Democrats constantly putting out information about, and I'm not a Republican to tell you the truth either, but just tell you that the hypocrisy of some of the people that are more supposedly on the left is, well, the right is a bunch of bullshit too. I can tell you that right now because they're corporate fascists in a lot of ways too. But just to tell you that New York City was actually very much intertwined with the profits of the South slavery. In other words, the only reason the South went to war against the South was over losing tariff money. Tariff money being that was the main thing that filled up the coffers of Washington D.C. 80 something percent of the money coming into Washington D.C. at that time was from tariffs. As a matter of fact, the South paid for most of the Revolutionary War of 1776, and that was something they were kind of pissed off about too, because even after that war was paid for, most of the money that the South paid into the Northern Union, whatever it was, if you want to call it that, Washington, D.C., was used to benefit the North, with very little of it going back to the South. They were actually paying, I think, 84% of the money coming into the coffers of Washington, D.C., currently now known as the Fruit Loop House, due to Obama. Now, I want to tell you that the way things are going, we're probably going to have a mass implosion of our economy. And, I know there's a lot of different people that say, the South will rise again. Well, I'm going to tell you right now, it's not so much that the South is going to rise again. What I think is going to happen is that the Northeast, in particular, centered around the New York metropolitan area, the financial power is, and no longer the manufacturing power, mainly the financial power, because they are the casino. They have the actual levers and wheels that generate the rigged system of money. They're not actually producing things because the factories have moved out of the Northeast largely, and also due to the EPA and regulations and all this other garbage and overtaxation, they just freaking packed up and boogied. What's going to actually happen is not so much the South is going to rise again, but the Northeast is going to get flushed down the toilet, along with all the people they supported, like the Hildebeest. Even Bill does not do me poison if ingested, induce vomiting immediately. I'm putting this out in this fashion because, I want really people to realize what this country was formed on in the first place. It was independence. It was the fact that we the people, we the people give the government legitimacy. The government isn't here like, the worst thing you can ever hear from the government say is, I'm from the government, I'm here to help you. Either, kill it right there on the spot or run like hell. That's one of the other things, because I can tell you right now, the government is actually all tied in, actually the corporations and the power brokers that run the government, and, give Hillary Clinton $225,000 to talk for 20 minutes like Goldman Sachs. They are the enemy of July 4th, 1776. Sure, they might have a little fireworks up north or something like that, and they might be paid for by Goldman Sachs, but it's all hypocrisy to the max. Now, I want to get a little more onto hypocrisy. I actually put this out in another video to give you an example how freaking intertwined New York City was with the slave trade back in the 1850s, the 1860s, and prior. New York City banks used to use collateral for their loans. If they had given a loan to a plantation or a business enterprise down south, and that person in the plantation or business enterprise owned slaves, the New York City bank would use the slaves as collateral for the loan. In other words, if the entity down south, the plantation or business, failed to pay the loan and they became a debtor, and the bank would need to collect on the note, what that bank would do was have the collateral, the slaves, sold on the open market, and it would collect their money. So actually, indirectly, New York City banks, actually directly at times, were actually involved in auctioning off slaves. That's why there were actually Democrats up there. Now, I don't even want to talk about political because I can tell you the Democrats and Republicans are already rotted through and through all the way. But I just want to get back to what the principles of 1776, and it's not this penis head right here, right now, but Mr. Obama. Now, I don't know what's going to happen in the future, but I could tell you that there are predictions out there by some volunteer, nonprofit military people that say the United States is going to implode due to excessive debt, and that the U.S. population is going to be drastically reduced over the next 9 years between now and 2025. That may be true because if you're considering the over $20 trillion of debt that's been accumulated, yeah, there might be a time where payments to the government stop, and you know what that means also medical assistance for people and also civil strife, and also in areas that are very crowded, like in the New York metropolitan area where a lot of the GDP comes from, is going to actually implode. I don't think the South, like I said, I don't think the South is going to rise again. It's going to look like it rose compared to the implosion, what's going to happen in the Northeast. And really why the implosion is going to happen in the Northeast? Because the Northeast has changed radically from the time of George Washington. At one time, George Washington was roaming the area of New Jersey, and you had Mine Hill, which was where the mining was done for the cannonballs for George Washington by Picatinny Arsenal, one of the oldest arsenals in the area. That was actually, bringing about the munitions for the Revolutionary Army of 1776 to today, where you have absolute excessive gun control in New Jersey. And to give you an example, if there's ever an emergency up in the Northeast area, during the time of Hurricane Sandy, talk about lack of freedoms. During Hurricane Sandy, the city and the states were going around fining people for cutting trees that had fallen over onto their house because they realized that they were damaging their house, and they were issuing fines of like $500 or something like that because the people that did not get a permit from the city to do so, even though it was an emergency and a hurricane and all this other kind of garbage. So when in the future emergencies that happen up Northeast, the excess regulations are actually going to implode the whole thing and actually cause a freaking revolution up there with a lot of problems. So I just want to bring this out because I've noticed that on the major media and also even on YouTube or some of the larger channels, there's been an extreme, coordinated propaganda attempt to lie about what our nation was formed about. Actually, the Confederacy was 1776 all over again. There's no doubt about it. It had nothing to do with slavery. That's freaking total bullshit. Yeah, I know that they wanted their slaves kept. The elite wanted their slaves kept. But as far as why did they declare independence, it was 100% over the taxation. The North wanted the slaves there too because the slaves were collateral for the loan. The slaves were producing cotton more cheaply, so that helped them with their manufacturing of textiles up in the North. Don't let the freaking North fool you about the North not wanting slavery. The North continues slavery in different ways through NAFTA, the Trans-Pacific International Partnership, and all this kind of garbage. That's going to be coming up. And you know who's all behind that? Obama and Hillary. And, most of the Republican establishment, too, including, like, the Bush family. Now, I'm going to tell you that what's coming up, though, is we're probably going back to where America's going to survive mainly. It's going to be in the old Confederate South. It's going to be actually in the Northeast when you're going far enough northeast to, like, Maine, New Hampshire, Vermont, upstate New York, western Pennsylvania, away from the cities and the corruptions. The Midwest of the United States, the Rocky Mountains, the Southwest, and even California when you get away from the coast, or the coast where the cities are. Actually, that's where America is still going to survive. It's actually going to survive away from the cities, but as far as where the cities are, things are in a collapse. But even when we're looking at a lot of the GDP that's coming out of New Jersey and New York metropolitan area, I can tell you a lot of it is now no longer manufacturing. It's family counseling. It's pharmaceutical drugs. You got like large corporations like Pfizer over there. A lot of these things aren't actually needed. Like a lot of things you could just a lot of alternative things you could do through nature. In other words, it's a big freaking money rack. It looks great on freaking paper that they're producing something, but in reality, they're not really producing something that is that beneficial for people, and it actually makes people more dependent upon them in other ways because the medical racket is all attached up into that area too, with pharmaceuticals being a 1.4 billion dollar industry throughout the world. Being that the South is so agricultural, it's going to be something that actually is going to give forth more fruits to healing with nature and, destroying the chemical industries up in north that actually try to heal the body with or control the symptoms of the body through chemicals. That's another thing whereby sometimes when you look at the north and you say, look at those numbers of the GDP, look how strong they are, until you actually look inside what those numbers are. They're not the old school numbers of manufacturing, products out of wood and steel. No more because of EPA, the restrictions, and all the other garbage that's going on up there, and also I don't know, the crazy political correctness. Like, we have the Obama Fruit Loop house, and in New Jersey, in New York City, we got the gender blender law that you can't say anything. If the person's 20% gender blender, 30%, or whatever the hell it is, you can't say nothing against that. It's a big freaking communist Marxist freaking garbage dump. That's what it's turning into. And let me put it this way: 1776 is dead in the Northeast. People can freaking delude themselves about it? No way. The only place it's still alive is down south in the Confederacy. It's alive in the Midwest. It's alive actually in the Rocky Mountains. It's alive in the extreme Northeast, where you're talking Maine, New Hampshire, Vermont, upstate New York, western Pennsylvania, western Virginia, which I guess you can say that's the freaking South too. And anywhere away from the big, large metropolitan areas, which includes California is cool too, Oregon and Oregon. I don't know how you say it unless you're up there. Or did I say it different from what the outsiders do in Washington State and all that, in Montana? But any place that's a large metropolitan area is going to collapse. There's no doubt about it. And it's the Marxist policies of America have become evident, and the corporations are going to collapse. They can actually tell us all this garbage that they're celebrating 1776, but at the same time, they're trying to stab 1776 in the back all the time, even by reinterpreting in the most asinine way. And I should probably put a video out on that separately, but it's probably not going to get enough attention. That I've seen they drag this out every year about they found a period in the actual, instead of an apostrophe or a comma or like a where it should have been part of the same sentence, that since there was a period there, that means that this second sentence doesn't mean then that the government derives its legitimacy from the actual consent of the people. I'm like, holy shit, man, they're really stretching it, man. And the thing is, I'm seeing a constant barrage even on YouTube. I'm seeing a constant barrage on the major media. I'm seeing a constant barrage even on Fox News, which is, I think, is a bunch of diarrhea. And I just want to put it out here that, the 1776 basically has been defeated in 1865 when the South was knocked down. It really has been. Not totally, and it's been a slow process. But the process has been speeded up greatly over the last 8 years under, the draft, whatever. We had the draft dodger in chief back in 92 to 2000, and then we had the freaking, the terrorist sponsoring George Bush during the next freaking 8 years. Then we had the damn, the jihadist in chief for the next freaking 8 years. Now we might have the bitch in chief for the next 4 years. I don't know. But everything's coming down. I'm going to tell you that right now. 1776 actually still alive, but everything's coming down as far as the corporatocracy. It's going down all the way. And, I just want to put this out here maybe to give some faith to some people that really are kind of miffed by some of this garbage like me, but also to tell you that, money itself is kind of a guise. And when you're looking at all the numbers, Sometimes it doesn't tell you exactly what's going on. You know, I could be charging somebody like $500 an hour to just, you know, write on a piece of paper with crayons and big letters, and they could be giving me $500 in exchange. They're blowing balloons for me, and I'm paying them $500, and we're making all this money. But what the hell are we doing, right? You know. So sometimes we got to get down to raw, tax and nuts and bolts and all this kind of shit. And that the problem is we aren't. Now Hillary, she can have all the money in the world for freaking from the freaking Goldman Sachs for talking 15 minutes for $225,000. But the reality situation is, um, it's coming to, you know, you know, it's freaking what do you call it? The red zone where everything's getting out is going to get knocked down, and that's where I think a lot of people would say, "What happened to our country?" Well, you know what? It happened. It actually happened way back when the South lost in 1865. That's when the slide went down. That war wasn't over slavery. They got to tell you it's about slavery because they got to justify the corporate bullshit in the Union and the powers of D.C. and the centralized power. Actually, after the South lost the war, that they just what happened then? When the Union got all together, what they start doing? Screwing over the American Indians, right? Right? I mean, Oklahoma used to be called Indian Territory. What'd they do? They had the Oklahoma land grab, right? That was the Indian Territory was supposed to be, the present day Oklahoma, the whole state, right? They took the Cherokees, the Choctaw, the Chippewa, the Seminole, and I don't know what they're missing one from the civilized, peaceful tribes that were in the southeast. They all relocated them over to Oklahoma, Indian Territory. And what happened when the Union got in power? Screw them, we're giving it to the settlers. Actually, I'm going to tell you right now, Democrats are the most anti-freaking minority, anti-black people going. The Democrats themselves. Uncle Tom Obama is a load of crap, but it's disappointing that a lot of blacks have never figured him out, even to this day. Not to this day, even though he's a Kenyan and a Muslim freaking slave trader ancestry guy, nobody's figured this guy. Most people have not figured this guy out till to this day, due to the steady barrage of propaganda and media propaganda coming out from the major media, and also freaking the alternative media, and also major YouTube channels, which I'm not. I'm a small YouTube channel, but I'm going to tell you, I want to get big because I want to put out the stuff the right way. And I can actually argue circles around a lot of these assholes that are freaking supposedly big because they don't know what the hell they're talking about. But me, I usually go right for the jugular. I have no freaking problem telling them what the deal is, because you know people that are apologetic and defensive and all this kind of crap. It's one thing to be that way when you did something wrong, but when I look at it with the Confederacy didn't do anything wrong. They were on the right side. They lost, but they were on the right side. They were on the right side, and they did. And they almost won with far fewer resources and people than the North. Even though you'll see a lot of specials on YouTube about, the Union had twice as many troops as the Confederacy, or the Confederacy had twice as many troops as the Union, but these Union troops are very hard, and it's the other way around, dude. The other way around all the way. But they're constantly freaking throwing garbage about the South, left and right, and you know the reality of the situation is when the South lost in 1865, which they did, 1776 was lost. That's the reality of the situation, and we've been downsliding ever since then. As a matter of fact, not only did the situation get worse with the blacks, because you know what, when the blacks were freed, what happened was the carpetbaggers all came down here and they took advantage of the blacks in other ways, and then any blacks that went up north they got took advantage of in even worse ways, and then it left the Union and the big corporate powers to get together to freaking take over all the American Indian lands out west. The Confederacy actually was more about, they gave more, it was more rights for the American Indians that under the Confederacy than ever was under the Union. A lot of people don't realize that. Somebody say, "Where's the link?" Well, it's going to be difficult to find a link. You're going to have to get the goddamn book. That's the way it is, and read it, because there is no link that much, because you know what happens? Links are written by, because the internet is pretty much even taken over by the big corporatocracy as it is. It's becoming pretty damn obvious. So anyway, just want to tell you, have faith. If you're from the South, and a lot of times people say the South will rise again. It's not so much as the South will rise again. It's that the toilet bowl in the Northeast where the freaking big crooked banks are, and the hypocrisy of them actually, the Northeast bringing over the slaves in the first place, especially Rhode Island. They're actually going to be the ones getting flushed down the toilet, especially for them supporting Obama, Marxist freaking Hillary Clinton, and also the freaking crooked freaking Republican establishment and the Bush cartel crime family, along with Romney. So, they're all going to flush down the toilet. We don't need politics. We don't need any of that. We just need to do our own thing and go back to states' rights and individual freedoms. And anybody in the major media that wants to interpret it a different way, go to hell. I'll say that as in summary, go to hell. I'm fighting for my freedom.